Hi, I'm Maria Aufheimer and I'm here to present mine and my wonderful co-authors' work on contextualizing and operationalizing design recommendations for rehabilitation games for young people. We conducted this work with the aim to make high-level design implications more actionable and contribute a practical approach for the design and analysis of games for physical therapy and rehabilitation. There is a lot of existing research that suggests that video games are a promising tool to support patient motivation in physical therapy. And HCI and games research provide a variety of frameworks and recommendations intended to help develop games in a way that optimizes this support. However, these recommendations often remain at a high level and are difficult to apply, especially for less experienced or non-professional game designers. In this work, we build on the key lessons that we have developed in prior work, aiming to make them more actionable. The first key lesson calls for a more holistic perspective on adaptation that includes situational factors and individual characteristics of patients. The second key lesson states that performance should be viewed through the lens of vulnerability, focusing on positive feedback and reinforcement. Lesson 3 argues that games offer an opportunity to increase patient self-determination in the space of physical therapy. And lastly, the fourth key lesson states the importance of recognizing the limitations of game-based physical therapy, highlighting the unique value humans add to the process through, for example, the relationship between patient and therapist. Our work in making these recommendations more actionable is guided by two research questions. First, as the original lessons were developed based on therapists' perspectives, we wondered how young people would perceive them and what context their perspectives would add. And second, we wanted to find a structured approach to making the key lessons actionable for the design and analysis of games for physical therapy. To answer our first research question, we conducted an interview study with 9 young people aged 7 to 16 who all engaged in physical or occupational therapy, and 8 parents, focusing on their perspectives towards the concepts and strategies that the key lessons were built on. We analyzed data using deductive thematic analysis and found that perspectives largely aligned with the original key lessons. For Key Lesson 1, we additionally found that young people were unaware or only partially aware of adjustments and suggest considering this when designing and implementing such mechanisms. For the second and third key lesson, we found that the original key lessons held true from young people's perspectives and had no addenda. For the fourth key lesson, we summarized that the appropriateness of employing a game-based approach is highly dependent on the individual and suggest the choice needs to be made on a case-by-case basis, especially if at-home use of a gaming system is intended. In answering our second research question, we first focused on the design of games for physical therapy. In our first approach here, we took Björk and Holopainen's collection of game design patterns and tried strictly categorizing them along the key lessons, aiming to deduce a set of best practice patterns for rehabilitation games. This didn't turn out as we hoped, and the results were simply not satisfactory in the end. However, this approach did inspire our second approach. Instead of strictly categorizing the patterns, 4 of the authors used the key lessons as lenses to structure our thoughts and guide our considerations in analyzing a reduced set of 12 example patterns. We found that this gave us opportunity to showcase our different perspectives and deeply engage with the implications of each of the patterns. For example, Key Lesson 3, Games as an Opportunity to Increase Patient Self-Determination, and the Freedom of Choice pattern, which concerns players being able to make choices in a game. Here, we found that intuitively, the pattern matches the key lesson, but when considering it for the context of physical therapy, there is potential for conflict with therapeutic requirements. In this context, it might make more sense to offer illusory choices as an alternative. However, these might be considered less valuable by patients. In the end, there was ample room for interpretation, leading us to rely on our combined prior experiences and knowledge of game design and the context of physical therapy. This shows the importance of designers and therapists closely collaborating to define which choices can and should be offered, depending also on the specific aim of the designed game. For the second part of this research question, we used the key lessons as a tool to analyze implementations of patterns in existing games and considered two examples. First, Hernandez et al.'s Liberi, and second, Nintendo's Wii Fit. For each of these games, we first identified features that relate to each of the key lessons, and then also connected the features back to the respective patterns in Björk and Holopainen's collection. Again, this helped us reflect and structure our discussions, only this time focusing on the concrete implementation rather than the potential offered by a pattern. However, the need for interpretation was still apparent here as well. Mirroring Katrinen's and Holopainen's remarks on designers' need to understand the design situation, and Shell's comment on the importance of understanding and clearly communicating complex ideas, we found that implications for design still require an understanding of the context to define and appropriately anticipate not only effects of individual patterns, but the interplay of mechanics in a gaming system as a whole, as small design decisions can have a major impact. Expanding upon Doris' criticism of implications for design in requirements establishing as not considering the relationship between, in our case, designers and the context for which they design, we argued that this also concerns the processes beyond. Implications and recommendations for design should be employed in an iterative, participatory process of integration and reflection, where they can be complemented by the knowledge and experience of domain experts. I would like to end this presentation by saying that our work in sum underscores the importance of acknowledging the complexity of game design for therapy, and that it should be understood as a reminder to carefully engage with the context and the communities for whom designs are intended. Thank you, and I would also like to thank my co-authors, our participants, the Baden-Württemberg Ministry of Science, Research and the Arts, and the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research for making this work possible.